Welcome to Heart with Michael, featuring your host, Michael Liben. Our program is designed to empower the bereaved community with information and stories from those who have suffered the most terrible loss. Michael himself, a bereaved father, will be meeting with people from around the world to share and to draw hope from their experiences. And now, here is Michael Liben.
Welcome, friends, to the 7th episode of the first season of Heart to Heart with Michael, a program for the bereaved community. Our purpose is to empower bereaved members of our community with resources, support, and advocacy information. Today's show is Losing Loved Ones to a Misdiagnosis. Here with us today to discuss this topic are our guests, Jackie Renfrow and Wilodene Gist. Jackie is a mother and a grandmother of children who have had or currently have long QT syndrome. Wilodene, Jackie's mother, grew up in the shadow of a loss to long QT syndrome because her father died from this genetic heart problem. Jackie's grandfather, Wilodene's father, had seizures and died unexpectedly in his sleep. Jackie's mother also started experiencing seizures at a young age. When Jackie had her children, Jimmy and Chrissy, no one expected both of them would also die at a young age. Since her devastating losses, Jackie has been raising awareness of long QT syndrome and having her family and others tested for it. Jackie's granddaughters are currently being treated at Riley Hospital. Several family members are also going through genetic testing. Welcome to Heart with Michael, Jackie, and Wilodene, and we'll begin with Wilodene.
Hi. Hi.
Wilodene, what do you remember about your childhood? What memories do you have of your father?
Oh, very few. I was only 3 when he died.
Do you know anything about what he had?
No, I don't remember that. I remember my grandma saying that he smothered and he'd run to the door and gasp for breath. And I believe that he was almost an invalid. But anyhow, he went to bed that night and he didn't wake up.
Did anybody explain what he had, or I guess really nobody knew?
No, nobody. In 1932, they didn't know a lot about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought he ate fish, and fish in the milk, they said, killed him. But then in those days, people just didn't realize. They were grasping for straws, I guess.
Well, that's very interesting because we like to say that, you know, in every age, it's always nice to say we know more now than we ever did before. And I remember that when my daughter was born 20 years ago, the first thing my doctor said was, well, be happy it's now and not 20 years ago. And I'm thinking they probably said that 20 years ago. They probably said that 40 years ago. And they probably said that 60 years ago, and how little they knew and how much we've learned since then. How long after your father's death was it when you began having seizures? And did you connect your experience with everything that your father went through? And were you concerned that you might meet the same end?
Well, I did, but my family didn't, I don't think. He died when I was about 3, and I had, when I started having my periods and stuff is when I started having seizures. So I was about 11 or 12 when I started them. My grandmother thought I died, of course. And then from then on, occasionally I would have a seizure till I had children, and then I got real bad.
Can you tell me what a typical seizure was like?
Oh, well, I would feel like I was going to die, you know, and I was real frightened. Mm-hmm. When I'd wake up and I felt like I couldn't give my breath, and I'd flop around. My husband would try to hold me down because he didn't know what to do either. And I felt I couldn't breathe. I would just gasping for breath. And then when I come out of it, I was totally wiped out. I was exhausted. Till I'd rest for several hours, and then I'd get better.
How long would the seizure last? A few minutes?
Just a few minutes, yes.
Now, this all began when you were 11. It got worse when you were having children. When you were finally diagnosed, how old were you?
72.
That's the part that that amazes me. What did they think you had for 72 years?
Okay, well, after I worked and everything, and after I finished having children, after a while, I guess I thought I was better because I didn't have them anymore.
Mm.
And then at 72, I was having a nervous spell, and I was taken to the hospital, and that's when they found that I had long QT.
So you're saying that you were actually clear, you had no seizures till you were 72 from, I'm guessing, about 30 years. So that's pretty amazing.
Yes, it is.
So you lived with long QT for 72 years, 30 of them clear. And did anybody along the way say you had anything? Did they explain what the seizures were?
They thought I had epilepsy, they said.
Did they say the same thing about your father, or they just didn't know anything about that?
But they didn't say anything about him then.
They had actually did an article on her dad saying he'd had a massive heart attack.
That's what they knew, I guess,
But
in 1930s.
in the meantime, I had 2 or 3 daughters. It's 2 daughters that started having seizures, and a grandchild that started having seizures. Everybody said I had epilepsy.
And so they thought the whole family had epilepsy for 3 generations?
I guess that's what they thought. They really didn't know what
Yes,
we had.
even though it wasn't hereditary.
When did long QT first become discovered as something that needed to be known about?
Well, I didn't know anything about it till they took me to the hospital and told me I had it.
2003.
2003.
Yes.
2003 is when you discovered that your mother had long QT.
Yeah.
When was it first medically recognized that long QT was something? Because obviously, in her father's day, they didn't know what it was. So when did people find that out?
1981. Dr. Vincent discovered it.
In 1981. So from the 30s to the 80s, 50 years of family history. A lot of people have this. Nobody knows what it is, and they just assumed it was epilepsy. And then 1981, they continued assuming that. There was no reason to think
Well,
otherwise.
there was, I'm not sure. I don't remember clearly about what, but Dr. Vincent, it was something to do with his wife and his sister, and he kept seeing the same thing happen, and he began doing research on it. And that's when he discovered that the long QT intervals were longer, and that was causing the heart to go chaotic, leading to cardiac arrest.
Okay, first of all, Jackie, I want to welcome you into the program and thank you for joining us. For people listening, the voice didn't change suddenly. We're now speaking with Wilodene's daughter, Jackie, who will be joining us for the next segment of the program. As we get ready now for a break, we'll be talking more with Jackie about losing her children, Jimmy and Chrissy, and how she coped with their first diagnosis, and then learning that the diagnosis was incorrect.
Hi, I'm John Montez of NBC's hit a cappella show, The Sing-Off. In a cappella music, it takes a team to create a sound that many will enjoy, just like it'll take a team to help my good friend Miles Schweitzer, an HLHS survivor. Let's help Miles fulfill his dream and make a big enough sound to bring awareness to congenital heart disease. Please visit him at gofundme.com/The Miles Project. Miles with the Y. Again, that's gofundme.com, The Miles Project. This is for Miles.
You are listening to Heart to Heart with Michael. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our program, please send an email to Michael Liben at michael@hearttoheartwithmichael.com. Now, back to Heart with Michael.
Today we've been talking with Wilodene Gist about losing her father when she was very young. Now we turn to her daughter, Jackie Renfrow, who lost 2 precious children to what they thought was epilepsy. Jackie, tell us a little bit about Jimmy and Chris. What were they like?
Oh, they were fun, loving, caring kids. Just appeared to be just your average kids. Jimmy was married and had a daughter. He was talking about going back to college and pursuing a career, buying a home. And then that's when, unfortunately, he lost his life.
What about Chrissy?
Oh, she was a character. She was just, you never knew what she was going to do. Very, very sweet, caring girl. Which she ended up having a child after we lost Jimmy. But
When did they start showing signs that something was wrong?
Jimmy began at about 11. He one day went out to get the mail, and he came in. He was standing at the front door, and he just fell over the couch having a seizure.
Now, did you recognize that as something you'd seen before in you or your mother?
Yes. Also, my sister, yeah, yes. And my nieces had already began having them at that point.
How old were you when you started having seizures?
I believe I was 6 years old.
Can you describe what that's like being 6 years old and having a seizure?
Well, actually, unfortunately, in our family, it seemed to be common. It was just the way of life. We would make a phone call and say, well, she had a seizure today. And but what had happened with me when I was 6, that I was running down to the neighbors. My brother and sister were having an argument, and of course I was running, so my heart was beating fast, and all of a sudden I just remember seeing spots in front of my eyes, and I ran into a rose bush, and then I remember my sister carrying me into the neighbor's house. So, of course, Mom took me to the doctor, and they put me on the same medicine that they'd been treating the whole family with for years.
Which was for epilepsy.
Yes.
Now, did that help? Did that hurt? Did that just do nothing? I mean,
I honestly do think it helped. I think one day they'll find out some of the medications that we've taken probably help save our lives to live so long. Unfortunately, they did not give these medications to my children, because ironically, the Dilantin causes your gums to swell. And I feel like I honestly think that played a role in it. I think they'll find out. I can't prove it, but I just think the medications we were on, the Dilantin and the phenobarbital, helped the long QT.
well, what do they give for long QT now?
Beta blockers.
Now, I admit to being completely innocent of knowledge on this. So what they're giving now, is that anything like what they give for epilepsy? Is anything like what you got for epilepsy?
No, it's it's a beta blocker, which is kind of more of a blood pressure pill. Anything that ends in, like I take metoprolol, so the toprolol, the ending operol, that's usually what we take for that. Plus, you normally have an implanted defibrillator, an ICD, which is a pacemaker, and then your device to shock you. So hopefully if our heart starts going out of rhythm, that it'll pace it right back to where it should be.
And that is together with medication or in place of medication?
No, both.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have both of them.
Your children were first diagnosed with epilepsy. At what point were they diagnosed with long QT, or were they not?
They never were diagnosed with long QT.
Mm-hmm.
It was in 2003 when Mom was taken to the hospital. We had just lost Chrissy. It was May 2003, and we had lost Chrissy July 2002. We were that close to, we would have been able to save Chrissy.
Oh,
We were 10 months.
That must be really hard. That must be really hard.
That was rough. It all was rough.
Is there any explanation how your mother, I mean, she's a miracle. Over 70 before they figured out what she had. Now they can treat it, and now, that's not the issue that it was before. How can they explain how she's been surviving this for so long without really knowing what it was and with taking the wrong medication?
Well, I don't know. We're not really sure, but once again, I'm kind of going back to the Dilantin, and she was on a different type of nerve medicine, because see, you got to remember, we had our heart beat fast, so we thought we had bad nerves, so we would increase our medications if our heart started racing. I think that might have played a role in it, because I know in 1981, I think I would come real close to death. I was 21 years old, and I had just had my daughter, and I was on Dilantin and phenobarbital, and they increased my phenobarbital, and I honestly think that helped save my life.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, that you were all diagnosed with the wrong thing, got the wrong medications, and it's possible that even the wrong medication kept you on long enough until they can make the right diagnosis.
Yes, I remember the doctors would just increase my medication, and I couldn't even get up out of bed to go to the hospital. My heart was going so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I had such a bad seizure. I honestly felt like I was dying, and my son kept yelling, "Mommy," and I honestly think that's the only thing that saved me.
Both you and your mother told me the same thing, that a seizure is, you feel like you're dying. I've never had a seizure. I've never had that kind of seizure. I don't know how to even relate to what you're telling me, but what is that like? You feel you're dying. Do you see the end? I mean,
I just remember it being really dark, and you kind of start being aware. You can hear people talking, but you can't move. It's like you're trapped. But your mind's still going. It's awful. It's a very awful thing to have to experience.
I watched my daughter have epileptic seizures, and I think it was difficult to communicate because she was also autistic. But I think the only thing that she really didn't like in life were those moments of seizure, because I could see it on her face, the total lack of control and the total not understanding what was happening to her. I think it was terrible. But they were over much quicker. What you're describing could take several minutes, and then you'd need to rest for several hours.
Exactly, yes. And it was really bad with my daughter. I remember when she was young, she would turn blue. I would see her when she was having a seizure. She would quit breathing, and I told a neurologist that, and he told me, "You don't quit breathing during a seizure." And I argued with him and told him she wasn't breathing, and he told me she was, but I know she wasn't.
Well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to take a break right here at that real difficult moment. And I appreciate that you and your mother have been with us and talking about your experiences with long QT. And I thank you for being so candid about the loss of your children. These are very difficult things to talk about. We're grateful that you shared how you learned from their ultimate diagnosis of long QT syndrome. The story of your journey from misdiagnosis to grieving parent has much to teach us. So please stay tuned. In our next segment, we're going to be talking with Jackie and Wilodene again, how genetic testing gave them hope for the future.
Tonight Forever by the Baby Blue Sound Collective. I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever.
Heart to Heart with Michael is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the HUG Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a non-profit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to uplift, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at www.congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, the hospitals that treat children with CHD, summer camps for CHD survivors, and much, much more.
You are listening to Heart to Heart with Michael. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Michael's program, please email him at michael@hearttoheartwithmichael.com. Now, back to our program.
Welcome back to Heart with Michael, a program for the bereaved. We are here with Wilodene Gist and her daughter, Jackie Renfrow. These women have shared their stories with us about losing loved ones to lung QT syndrome and how misdiagnosis affected their lives. Wilodene, when Jackie's children died so suddenly, did it bring back memories of your father and your childhood? And did genetic testing become a part of the conversation with the medical professionals?
Well, no, really, I was too small when my dad died to even remember. But it broke my heart because I knew that they had the same thing I had because they were having the same problem, and it made me feel kind of guilty. You know, they were my babies.
Why would you feel guilty?
Because I feel like I did it to them. You know, they got it from me. Or I felt like that way at the time.
Well, did you know it was genetic? Did you,
No.
at that point?
No, but it was happening through several generations, so you know you figure that it's something you passed on.
I'm very sorry to hear that, and I hope that you feel better now, knowing that it's not anything that you could have done or changed.
Oh, I do, but I just wish, well, it just wasn't to be. So
I understand. How has genetic testing now been a part of your life? You've been tested. Anybody else?
oh yeah, the whole family's been tested. Actually, my son he knew he had it, but just 2 or 3 months ago he had to go in and have a defibrillator put in, and I guess he was in pretty bad shape when they got him in there.
How's he doing?
He's doing great now, but he still can't drive for several months.
Has anybody thought about how this is that it's affecting everybody? I mean, I know that it's genetic, but sometimes when it's genetic, somebody slips through the cracks. Somebody doesn't get it. It appears to me that now there isn't anyone who hasn't been touched by this.
Not in our immediate family, no.
We're talking about 4 generations of everybody.
I have relatives that I'm sure. I had one cousin to die in her sleep at 27. She had epilepsy, of course. Her daughter killed herself because she was having seizures so bad. And I think there was another one in her family that, but they won't listen. They won't listen to you.
Oh, so they're still saying epilepsy?
Yeah, and I've sent them the genetic testing that they were related to me, and I had what mutations I have with the lung QT, and they still haven't really responded to it.
What's it like when you find out? They're a prime example. What is it like when you find out that it's a misdiagnosis, that everything you know essentially is wrong? What's that like?
It was just like a jigsaw puzzle, and you had all these pieces that fit in, and you knew there was something wrong, but you just didn't know what the final piece was, because after Jimmy died and Chrissy died, I remember sitting there, and there was about 10 months then before we found out, and I would look at their kids and think they're going to die of the same thing if I don't figure out what it is. Well, our resources, of course, weren't like they are today, but still you need a physician or somebody to kind of guide you in the right direction, or hopefully someone is raising awareness so you can hear about it. But I remember looking at those kids thinking they're going to die the same way that their parents died, and I didn't know what to do to stop it. And it still worries me, even though they have defibrillators. But when Mom was diagnosed at St. Vincent's Hospital in Indianapolis, I called the physician that saw my daughter and I told him, I said, my mom has a heart condition called long QT, and I said, I'm sure that's what we have, and that's what killed my children. And he even told me, no, you don't have long QT. It's too rare. There's no way. And I said, well, they're telling me we do, and I know we do.
And on what did he base his answer? You don't, just because he assumed it's too rare? He didn't check?
Because he told me that the odds of someone coming into his office and having long QT were slim to none. I said, well, it happened.
It happened a lot.
Yeah, it still is happening a lot, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there. There's not a whole lot of awareness young people having heart conditions.
Well, you said that you need a physician, and you need somebody who can raise awareness. In your case, there wasn't anyone to raise awareness. There was just you. You had to be the one to raise the awareness for yourself. How does that happen? If you hadn't, you wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that you have to think that was, the internet was just beginning to become popular. Now we can get on there and possibly Google things and come out with some type of an answer, but then there was nothing. We just knew that we had something wrong, and I couldn't explain why my children were gone and we were all here. It made no sense. And like I said, the only thing I can make heads or tails of is possibly the medication that we were on, because Jimmy and Chrissy were both on the Tegretol, and they had always kind of give us something to help with our nerves because of our heart pounding so fast, but they didn't want to do that with them. Feel like if they would have, maybe, just maybe, they would have been okay.
Let me ask you one final question now.